Sheree J. Woo! Dipped in a new outfit. 40 on the wrist and it's lit. Presidential suites at the Ritz. And I just got back from a trip.
Hi, South by Southwesters. I'm Sherry Hoffman, CEO of Transparence Entertainment Group. Welcome to How to Secure the Bag in Uncertain Times. With a worldwide pandemic crippling livelihoods for well over a year, now more than ever, music creators need to ensure that they secure the bag to receive their fair share of royalties. Our group of panelists will be discussing a royalty stream that you may not know much about, neighboring rights. Along with myself, today's panel features Ann Toshis, CEO of Cobalt Neighboring Rights, Bruce Wayne, half of the Grammy Award-winning music production team, MIDI Mafia, and VP of Transparence Entertainment Group, and the incredible Sheree J, rapper, choreographer, and entrepreneur. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Glad to have you all here. So first, I'd like to start off with Ann. Ann, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you're not a native to the United Kingdom, so let us know where you started from and how you got to this point.
Yeah, you'll definitely hear by the accent that I'm not born in this country. I'm based in the UK, in London, but originally from Sweden. Came to the UK in 1996. I have worked in the music industry all my life. I started out, well, actually, my dad was a musician and was doing all the touring and recording and all of that. And then when he stopped doing that as his full-time job, he wanted to kind of stay in the music industry. So started working at STIM, which is the Swedish Composer Author Society. And he actually got me a summer job there at the age of 13, which is a legal age to work in Sweden. So I helped out there, and that's kind of how my interest in music rights came about. I happened to have a bit of developed a good understanding of writer splits and things like that, and then finished school, didn't really know what I wanted to do, so thought that I'd at least temporarily go back to work for STIM, which I did for a little bit less than a year, worked with the Swedish music publishers at that time, and then was asked to come and work for a small independent music publisher called Sweden Music, which was the ABBA company, run by Stig Andersson, the manager of ABBA. And they had just been bought by Polygram, which of course was beginning to be a major company, and worked there for a few years doing copyright and royalties, and then I was asked to come to London and work in the international office of Polygram, and that was in '96. I thought I'd do that for a couple of years and go back to Sweden, but here I am about 25 years later on. I'm still in the UK and worked for Universal for a long time. So Polygram became Universal Publishing, worked there for many years in a copyright role. And then about 7.5 years ago, I was asked to come and work for Cobalt and head up their neighboring rights division. Didn't know anything about neighboring rights at that time, and but yeah, I thought it was a challenging thing to get into and get into that side of the business, and here I am.
Fantastic. Yeah. I've heard some rumors about Sony and Cobalt. You want to elaborate?
Yeah, that's true. So I have been working, of course, for Universal, being a major company, and a week ago it was announced that Sony have actually bought AWOL, which is our label business, artist label business, and also the neighboring rights division. So we will be working closely with Sony going forward. So yeah, very exciting times ahead.
Fantastic, and we're glad to have you today. I'm going to go on to Bruce Wayne, our original Dark Knight. So Bruce, you've done everything. Grammy award-winning record producer with the MIDI Mafia. You have a huge catalog of music with the Made series, and you're the VP of Transparence Entertainment Group. So tell us a little bit about where you started, how you got here, in 30 seconds. No, I'm kidding.
Well, I started off like everybody, like an artist in some sort of way, and then I fell in love with producing, and then I started selling records independently. So I learned a lot about the business, and between producing and learning how to become a businessman, we found another love for TV and film, and then started producing more in that. space, and that became primary for me over the last like 7 years. And then while doing that, I started to find a love for music rights and you know, helping other artists. And then I got the opportunity to work with you, Sherry, and Dennis. And you know, it's like going to Harvard, you know. And I love to learn new things, and that's really it, you know. Creative, but now creative entrepreneur now, and now doing what I'm doing now, helping other artists, you know.
Fantastic. So speaking of Harvard and Ivy League, Sharia, you have a crazy history. You come from a musical family. I heard, rumor has it, that you were accepted to an Ivy League school, and then you went off to a career in music and choreography and entrepreneurship. And please tell us about that. It's super exciting.
Yes. So my father was in a hip hop 90s group called Double X Posse. And so I kind of grew up in a hip hop home. Like, it was just all the time. Cyphers going on in my living room, whether studio, watching him tour. So the music bug was very innate. And, but my grandmother, me and her were really close, and she always wanted me to be a lawyer, which I, you know, for a while was really, you know, game for the idea. And I was gun-ho that when I went to college, that was the career I was going to choose. And I did get a scholarship and got accepted. And I remember starting, going in for my first year. But I also was very creative, always was a creative girl, loved music, loved dance and choreography. And so I would be sneaking over to New York City because I came up in Jersey. So I'll be sneaking over to New York City to try to get in the scene and see what was going on creatively in the scene. And I ended up auditioning for an agency while in college, while I started college. And then immediately after my audition, I had got offered a tour for 6 months out of the country. So it will be overseas tour. I will be taking for 6 months performing. And I just started school, but in that moment, I had decided that I would follow my heart and my dreams. And I decided to leave school and take the tour. And ever since that, it's just been a whirlwind for me. You know, I've done a lot of things in the creative music business. I've worked as a choreographer, many different artists, Rihanna, Madonna, Beyonce, Twister, like the list goes on. Mm-hmm. And then once I transitioned into my artistry of being a rapper and an entertainer, I got an opportunity to train and mentor underneath hip hop legend Missy Elliott. And so I learned a lot of amazing things from her, definitely a musical genius. And I'm grateful for having that type of mentor to really help me understand the music business and understand about being a female MC in the music business. And so I mentored underneath Missy for a while. I then went on to start my own company called Banji Entertainment, and which is the acronym for Be Authentic, Never Jeopardize Individuality. And under that label, I then decided that I would sign myself to myself on that label, which was really one of those things that Missy as a mentor always encouraged too. You know, you always wanted to, as an artist coming up, try to have that control over your work and, you know, and your creativity. After that stint, I kind of got an opportunity to go on the show, a Fox 5 television show called The Four, which I was representing hip hop on that season. And I ended up breaking a couple records, first female hip hop battle on national television, longest seat holder in history for The Four. And we also won a television and film award that year for best talent show on television, on TV.
Wow, that's dope.
And so thank you. And so we so now I'm still being creative, doing music, doing some other things with Banji Entertainment, working with Transparent, and I'm just here to have a great panel. Let's get it.
Fantastic. You know, one more thing, because now you're as an entrepreneur, you are a DIY true artist. You are no longer with Missy Elliott's Gold Mine label. You're doing all self everything. Rights holder.
And what's ironic is that I've really been an independent artist my entire career, even working underneath Missy, because we never really sought out a bigger major deal. I was specifically signed to her to her label, Gold Mine, really the first independent artist signed to her.
Yeah, fantastic. You know, that brings me back to Anne for a minute. A few years ago, Anne was one of the founders of a company called the IFR, based in the United Kingdom. And I think they just rebranded its acronyms So Anne, tell us just a little bit about the IFR. We know it's a nonprofit and it helps rights holders and artists and all kinds of things. So just speak to that for a minute.
Yeah, so IFR stands for International Alliance for Artists and Rights Holders. And it was set up a little bit more than 2 years ago, and it was myself and Naomi Asher, who now, she was at Wixon at the time, now works for Sony ATV Neighbouring Rights. And we got together, we were talking about the fact that in publishing you have the music publishers associations locally in every country that are sort of helping and supporting music publishers, and they work really closely with the CMOs to make processes better and working together to make the industry better. But there was nothing like that on the neighbouring rights side. And we all kind of have the same issues when it comes to societies. We wanted to be transparent and all of that. So we got together and decided to create IFR. And a big portion of what we do as well is to educate people, because neighbouring rights is, I would say, it's the least known sort of income stream in the music industry, and there's still a lot of people who will have earned money in that space but don't really know that they have, or they don't know how to collect it. So that's a big part of what we do in IFR, is to educate people how they can go about collecting that revenue stream.
First thing is, what are neighboring rights and where do they come from? So neighboring rights are also known as related rights because they sit next to the publishing copyright. It doesn't mean anything between one country exchanging with their neighbor in another country. But what the difference is, it's a sound recording royalty for any performer or master rights holder who has contributed to a recording that's been publicly performed. Tell us a little bit about where neighboring rights come from.
Yeah, so as you rightly said, it's a royalty that comes from the physical recording. Well, it's not so much physical anymore, but the recording. Anyone who, so it's either the rights holder, so that will be the label, or the self-releasing artist that owns their own master rights. So it's that's one share of neighbouring rights, and the other share is the performer royalties, and that is featured artists and any non-featured, so session musicians. It could be anyone who's made an audible contribution to a recording. Those are the interested parties who receive a royalty. So if you came into the studio and did a hand clap, that is an audible contribution, and you are due neighbouring rights. In sort of clubs, pubs, restaurants, shops, etc. The CMOs license those usages and collect that money, and then they kind of distribute according to the rules that they have in place between the labels and the featured and non-featured performers. And also, I should mention, in some cases, it's the same CMO, so the same collection management organization that collects for the label share and the performer share. In some countries, it's different to different organizations. We even have examples where it's split more than that. So in France, for instance, there's one society for the featured performer, and there's another society that is with the non-featured. Yeah, the Rome Convention was a treaty that was signed, I think, in 1961, and it was sort of to protect the recording rights and the people who had contributed on that recording. And there were a lot of countries who did sign that Rome Convention, and that's how neighbouring rights really came about. And generally speaking, countries in Europe did all sign it, so that's why there's good coverage, good protection in Europe in neighbouring rights. There were also, countries in Latin America who did sign it. They're not so good at paying neighbouring rights today, but they should. So people who have signed the Rome Convention should apply the proper neighbouring rights protection and pay money. There are some countries that signed the Rome Convention with reservations, Australia being one of them, so they don't actually pay to international performers, they pay to local performers. And then, of course, the US did not sign the Rome Convention, and that is the reason why, because it works very much on reciprocity. If we if you pay us, we pay you. So because the US didn't sign the Rome Convention, the thought process in the rest of the world is that, well, we actually don't get neighboring rights from the US for UK performers, for instance. So that's why the UK wouldn't pay for US performers. And of course, there's been a change with Sound Exchange and dealing with the digital side of the business, and there's a lot of money in that. But it's quite interesting to see as well that that digital space, it's not the same in outside of the US. You don't have the Sirius XM and iHeart radio and all of that. They haven't actually been that kind of development in Europe or the rest of the world. So it's very much sort of terrestrial radio and TV that is still sort of doing the rounds here. And that is where the neighboring rights sort of sit in Europe and are kind of coming out of that income, those income types.
So there's like, I know we're talking about a little bit about this would be a reciprocity, and the different collective management organizations do exchange kind of a sideways reciprocity in certain countries. Like, for example, Sound Exchange may have an agreement with England that they will send out digital. However, in PPL, which represents the UK for performers and rights holders, they won't pay back for AFM, FM radio because that right is not except in the United States. It's only a right for songwriters. So I know that Canada just made some changes in their legislation. So what's that about?
Yeah, so Canada didn't used to pay US performers. And relating back to the Rome Convention, they signed the Rome Convention, but the US didn't. But it's as a result of the trade negotiations between the US and Canada that there was an agreement put in place whereby from 1st of July 2020, Canada recognizes US as nationals, you know, equal treatment for any national, basically. So that means that from the 1st of July, any performances taking place from 1st of July, I should say, Canada are going to pay to US performers. So that's a good change, and you can see that things can happen outside of the Rome Convention. You don't have to sort of revert back to a treaty that was signed in 1961. You can actually move on beyond that, which I see as a really positive thing.
So hypothetically, if so in the past, Bruce and Sharia Bruce may have produced Sharia's track. In the United States, Canada would not pay that because it was produced in the United States. But now, instead of having to, you know, drive or fly over to Canada to record there to get reciprocal rights, they can actually, as of July of 2020, they can record in the United States and be treated just like any other Canadian artist.
Yep, that's absolutely correct.
Yeah. So Bruce, tell me about how does a producer get paid in the United States?
There's two ways now, which is very new. When it comes to related rights, neighboring rights for a producer, you would normally make your money from Sound Exchange. You would get a letter of direction. Whatever record you produced, you have a letter of direction with that artist, the featured performer, and you would make your money out of the featured performer side. But as we know, what Sound Exchange does, they're responsible for paying the rights owners and just the featured performers. And then they will send the 5% to the Intellectual Property Distribution Fund. And that fund pays background vocalists, and they also pay musicians, arrangers. And the modern music producer falls under all of those categories, because the modern music producer is playing keyboards or some kind of instrument. If you're Timbaland, you're beatboxing, if you're snapping your fingers, like anything that's contributing to the actual master that the producer's contributing, like as either quote unquote a background vocalist or musician, they're making money on that side too. So where the flaw is, and this is something we're going to start talking more to attorneys, is that usually when you sign your producer agreement, they just put producer. You don't usually put the other credits. You don't put that you played keyboards. You don't put all of the other things that you do. And when you don't have those credits, the fund, and a lot of other CMOs around the country, they don't know who to pay. So that's one of the main reasons why a lot of producers don't get that call in the middle of the day or middle of the week, like, hey, we have some money for you, because they're not credited on the songs other than as producer. And then according to the CMO, that's how they identify who you are. So a producer, in short, gets paid from the sound exchange side, from his letter of direction, from the feature performance side, and now they can be paid from the intellectual property distribution fund in the US if they've performed on the record, which means played keyboards or any kind of instrument. Does that clear? Does that make sense?
It makes sense. So your advice to any producer that's out there when they're negotiating, right? When they're negotiating with the featured artist and even the label for that matter, they should make sure that they have all their roll codes down, especially in those, the liner notes, which don't really exist in printed form anymore, but get embedded at the recording session or, on Pro Tools or whatnot.
Exactly, definitely, especially just your credits. Sometimes a lot of producers don't like to add a lot of that stuff because it can be very long, and a lot of record labels and other people, not other people, but some people are like, why are we writing all of this stuff down? No one reads it anyway.
Well,
but for us to get paid,
Ann and I know that there's certain societies overseas that pay multiple roll codes, not just one or the other. And what you're referring to, the AFM SAG-AFTRA Intellectual Property Rights Distribution Fund, long title, they pay in two pools. The money they get from Sound Exchange is paid 2.5% to vocalists, 2.5% to musicians. So if you do both, make sure you have it down, or you're not going to get paid for everything.
Exactly.
Freya's shaking her head like, and it's really hard to amend it later on.
Yeah,
definitely. And you just said 2.5% for musicians, 2.5% for background vocalists. A lot of people may not think that's a lot of money, but that money is very significant, especially if you have a couple of hit records, that's in the system and credited properly. We have clients that are generating, 6 figures just off of that 2.5%, so I'm just saying, I want to make it really clear that don't pay attention to 2.5%. Pay attention to getting your credits done and let the hit records take care of everything else for you, because it can be very lucrative for you.
Okay, how is this different than publishing? Sharia, let's say that you are the rights owner for songwriting. You wrote the lyrics, you wrote that. Are you entitled to neighboring rights for the master?
not always, but you know what I mean? Like, it's weird because for me, there's some records, that when I originally created underneath Missy and all that, like I wrote the records and, and they were like, I composed them, but in the end, like I wasn't the master. I didn't own the masters to it because they did, along with, with Goldmine. And so I guess, a lot of times with the people who own the masters, it's usually like the people who put in the money to create the record, to like build it. And so initially for a couple of records that I had, I wasn't the master's owner, owned the masters of it. But then when I went independent and then I started to realize and understand more about, the rights that I had as even an independent artist, especially, my rights as a owner of the composition, and then that extra step then to understand that you then have a whole nother portion that you're, that can be allocated to you if that you're entitled to those funds as a master rights owner. And a lot of artists I know, especially independent artists, they don't even understand that that's a angle connected to composing a record. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's one of the most talked about things is in the United States, the new mechanical licensing collective. And why are we saying how this is different from publishing? Pretend there's a couple of pies. There's more than two, but I'm going to, for the purposes of this, there is the royalties for the composition. That's one pool that pays out to publishers and songwriters. Then the pool we're talking about, neighboring rights, that pays to labels, which AKA would be the DIY artist that owns their own masters. It would be somebody that is a rights holder. It has various titles. So there's that. And also it pays artists, both featured and non-featured.
I want a lot of creatives to know that as a master rights owner, um, let's just take Spotify, for example. Spotify is pretty much paying 3 royalties. Most creatives only know about 1 royalty. That's just streaming. Like, hey, I got 1 million streams. Where's my money? You know, I made $5,000. That's but they don't understand that you're also getting a royalty from Spotify. I was gonna say Shopify, from Spotify, for the performance of that master as well too, which is non-interactive. So for example, Spotify, you may see like Drake Radio, or on Apple Beats One. Those are non-interactive radio stations. So those DSPs are actually sending you money for that as well too. So again, if you don't have your credits, you don't got everything set up right, you're not going to make that money. And that's goes to Sound Exchange, and that's how you get that money. But then there's also the the mechanical the mechanical from the publishing share as well too. So these DSPs are paying 3 royalties to you, not just 1. And I think it's real important, and a lot of creators start kind of understanding that. They just think about one money, what the money that comes into their into their TuneCore account or their Empire account or whatever, but it's much more than that. So that the way you would register for publishing, you need to register the same way for your neighboring rights or the performance of your master. And the way you do that primarily is with your credits. Got to make sure your credits are there.
Yeah, I do want to clarify though, not all collectives, these worldwide collectives, and there are somewhere around 100 of them, but there's several big ones, including Sound Exchange, PPL, and GVL in Germany, that they pay for the non-interactive side. They don't necessarily pay for Spotify. I know Anne knows some of the countries that believe Spain and Hungary, or might be a couple of them that have had legislation passed that do get paid from Spotify.
That's correct, and it's fairly recent. So yeah, it was first happening in Spain, and one important thing to mention here as well is because I think the industry as a whole is quite worried about the pie that is kind of how it's split at the moment. Let's say Spotify, who are paying then to the label and are paying for the publishing, that suddenly there's this third element that needs to be paid out of that same pie. And what's happened in Spain is that it's not taking sort of reorganizing the pie. It's actually additional money on top of what's already been paid by Spotify that is going to the performer pot in this instance. So there's a big campaign going on in Europe, and it goes back to the EU Copyright Directive that kind of has language in there to look at the streaming side of things. There's a big debate going on in the UK as well. Separately, of course, we're not in the EU anymore, but there's a big discussion on streaming income and how that big pie should be split. So there's a lot of momentum at the moment. Spain and Hungary have implemented it, and hopefully there will be other countries following on from that as well.
We're going to talk about Sound Exchange, right? Like Sherry said before, neighboring rights are not the law in the United States, right? Like that's not law, but Sound Exchange pays the royalty for the performance of the master. They are what we call the CMO for the United States for that royalty. Now, who do they pay? They pay the rights holder and they pay the feature performer, and they send the balance of the money to the fund. To elaborate a little bit more, the rights holder receives 50% of that revenue. The feature performer receives 45%, and then again, that 5% is what's sent over to the fund for non-featured performers, and that's musicians and background vocalists. So basically, you don't have to be a member of Sound Exchange to collect your money. As long as the data matches, you could sign up with Sound Exchange and receive your money. You do not have to be a member.
So there's a registration and then there's a membership. So you do have to register to be a member and have them collect worldwide for you, is what you're saying, correct?
Definitely. And that goes for whether you're a rights holder or a featured performer. Something to keep in mind too is that this is only for non-interactive broadcast. What does that mean? The non-subscription version of Pandora, Sirius XM, yes, exactly, Sirius XM.
Yeah.
And like I said, on Apple Music, it's Beats One. There's college radio stations. There's you know,
A lot of college radio stations.
music played on a podcast, like anything that you're not choosing it, and that station or that provider is just playing. In regards to was written on the slide, like conflicts on the performer side, conflicts can arise if performers cannot agree on who is considered the featured artist when there is a dispute regarding the royalty splits. So it's really cool what Sound Exchange does now. Basically, if there's some kind of conflict, like what they do in publishing, they stop the payment and someone has to claim it. And whoever claims it within the right amount of time, then the claim is resolved, and then the payment goes to the right person. So I mean, other than that, Sound Exchange is really the CMO for the United States for digital broadcasts, which pays for the performance of the sound recording, which we know as the master.
Right. So the public performance and non-interactive digital broadcasting.
Exactly. Like, I think publishing is something that everybody really understands a little bit more. So the best way to explain it is just like the way a song is played on the radio, like regular radio, like whether it's a Hot 97 or a Power 105 or 92.3 Real, that's terrestrial, that's non-interactive. The United States doesn't pay that royalty, but that royalty is paid internationally, and that's what Anne was talking about in regards to the Rome Treaty. We didn't sign it. Plus, the United States doesn't actually honor that. So we couldn't pay it even if we wanted to.
So the only performers that would be entitled for that type of reciprocity would be whether they were born in a Rome Convention country,
exactly,
have dual citizenship in a Rome Convention country,
exactly,
recorded in a Rome Convention country.
Exactly.
And then some little exceptions like simultaneous release in a Rome Convention country in the United States at the same time. There's some exceptions. But,
exactly. So you can look at it the same way, like, oh, when my song is played on the radio, I get the money from ASCAP and BMI. They do the collections for me. And on the digital side, Sound Exchange does the collections for me. Like that's one of the easiest ways to kind of look at it, to balance it out.
Yeah, and we always comment, I mean, a lot of this audience, they are songwriters, and they said, well, I got paid for my song being played on the radio. Yes, you did. So we always kind of use the example of Dolly Parton writing a song for Whitney Houston, and Sharia knows that song real well.
Yes.
Well, Dolly Parton's the only one monetizing on this song. The state of Whitney Houston doesn't get a penny for that being played on Hot 97 or various stations. It's played constantly over the last 30 years or so.
And she gave that song a whole new life too. I mean, connected with the film too. Like she should be getting a check for that. I'm sorry.
So there's legislation in the United States called the AM/FM Act that was not included in the original Music Modernization Act, but I know that the Recording Academy and other entities are fighting to get that right. So it's been an ongoing thing with the broadcasters forever and a day, but hopefully someday that'll open up the just rights back and forth, which will monetize everything, both for rights holders and performers. This is how royalties are allocated in the United States. Bruce, again, I didn't put the name of the fund here, but I'll say it. That little tiny sliver, the 5%, is the AFM and SAG-AFTRA Intellectual Property Rights Distribution Fund. Very long title. It's an independent third party administered by the two unions, the American Federation of Musicians and SAG-AFTRA. So
definitely.
But this is how they're allocated, and this is not how it's allocated overseas, is it?
No, I mean, differs in different countries, but generally I would say that the split is 50% to the rights holder, so the label in this case, and 50% goes to the performers. But how that split between performers differs country by country. It could be, some countries will be a 60-40 split or a 70-30. There's some countries that work on a points-based system, so the more instruments and things that you actually contribute on a recording, the more you get paid. So I think that's where the credits come back into play as well, that Bruce mentioned earlier. You know, that will help you get more points. And you should, one thing also, you should never say all instruments. You should really specify each instrument one by one, because it will make a difference. And yeah, it doesn't look very pretty on a CD cover or the equivalent today, but you know, it's how you get paid, what you got the right to be paid for. So it is important, but yeah, it differs country by country.
Okay, and how does that affect Sharia? Let's say Sharia, she's a rapper and she decides to do some beatbox. Is that 2 vocal performances, or is that that's probably just 1, huh?
That's really 2.
And then she picks up a tambourine. That's definitely an instrumental. So
Yeah.
Sharia, you're gonna start playing the tambourine.
No, but it's funny because so many of us artists, I think like we do, especially an artist like me, I'm very hands-on in my session. So I might slick like pick something up or play an instrument, like, you know what I'm saying? And we don't even understand like the importance of citing or taking note of all the things that we actually contribute to making a record come to life.
So if you had just one piece of advice for the audience out there, what would it be about your metadata?
Oh my gosh. Well, one, I think the most important part, especially for artists, is to know, like, to understand what that is. Like, because I already know, like, a lot of artists, and I had to learn a lot of these things too, like just being in the mix and learning, getting jewels from other people. And a lot of young artists coming up, and even independent artists, are like, when you mention metadata, they like, wait, what, you know, what is that? Or what do you have to, like, they have no idea about it. I feel like now in today's music industry, especially, we have to be more well-versed on the things that are like directly connected to our music. Like, you know what I'm saying? Ask questions and really try to understand, because a lot of times artists have always just been responsible for their creativity, you know, and then that's it. But I think that nowadays in this new industry, you have to know like all the angles of what's actually going into making your record.
Absolutely. I couldn't said it better.
It's a business.
Yeah.
You know, it's a business, and as an independent artist, you're an entrepreneur. You're a businessman, businesswoman, and with any business, you know, you got to cash checks.
Right.
Know,
if it's
you
a
gotta
business.
cash checks. So you know, you want to collect all your money so you can be a profitable business, and knowing every angle of it now and what you contribute and what your value is more important than ever.
So this slide is kind of you, Sharia, music creator with multiple roles, and
Right.
the various matrix of you know, the performance in a sound recording and how it works here. So we touched upon a little bit of everything in the U.S. Terrestrial radio, which is AM, FM. Only the PRO, if you see the arrow, pays for that. So that would be the songwriter would get paid, but there's no right for the artist to get paid. The non-interactive services show that's all the various forms of what Sound Exchange pays through. They get reported to by the various digital service providers, and then they go ahead and pay. Either they have a reciprocity agreement with the CMOs, they're obligated to pay by the U.S. Copyright Act 5% for non-featured performers into the AFM and SAG-AFTRA fund. I just was curious. So how do you register as a recording artist with a collective? How do you register as a performer? What CMO should you register with?
I had to do both. Like I've had, you know, an agent who actually puts in all that, who makes sure all that stuff is taken care of. But then I've also had to take records where I had to physically go in and, you know, connect with all the other composers that are a part of it. You know, we got to figure out our percentage, and then I have to go up there and physically put all that stuff in. And of course, you know, initially when I did it, like I didn't have any idea what I was doing, but I guess, you know, once you hop into it, and then you can kind of like be a little more hands-on, then it teaches you the ropes a little bit. And then I've had to like teach people, after I learned, I've had to show other people who I work with how to then do it. So I just wouldn't have to be the person always stuck, you know, not necessarily stuck, but, but you know what I mean? And so, but I feel like understanding how that works, you know what I mean, is a very important part, because it taught me a lot just about the importance of it, how to make it work. I'm a part of ASCAP, so when I go up, I have a publishing, and then I have to worry about my own personal writing, registering my own writing thing. But I've really done both. I would just have, for me personally, I think I'd like somebody who's like really well versed in it to kind of get in there and make sure all the stuff is registered. And
yeah, you're totally at that level to do that. And talk about a lot of our audience, and maybe even the majority of our audience that is a do-it-yourself artist starting out. What advice can you give them, whether it's here in the States or in the United Kingdom? Because I know you know a lot about PPL, which is the equivalent of Sound Exchange.
I mean, one thing that I think is quite interesting to kind of just draw a comparison, you know, in publishing, and this will explain why neighboring rights is so complicated. You know, in publishing, you write a song, and let's say you're 4 writers and you get equal splits, 25% each. That is the split. It applies to every single country in the world where that copyright is being used, and that's what you're paid. In neighboring rights, I mentioned it before, it differs how societies split, and the fact that some societies and countries work on the point system. So it's different in every country, basically, and that's where you need to have that knowledge, what you need to do in order to register it correctly, and therefore maximize the collections, and you get what you actually are entitled to. That is one of the reasons why neighboring rights is so complicated. And then of course we have the qualification coming into that. We talked about the fact that US performers do not qualify for payment in lots of countries because they didn't sign the Rome Convention and all of that. So there are different elements coming into play. It's like your nationality, where the record label is based, where the actual recording of your part took place. So all of those things come into play when a society decides whether you get paid or not. So that is the complicated part of neighboring rights. So in that sense, you know, by all means, try and do it yourself, but gosh, it's complicated. And also the fact that you're dealing then, if you would do it yourself and go to each society around the world, or those that you deem are important, you know, you're doing it in different languages. You need to, you know, talk to the French society and the Spanish and the German. It gets very, very complicated in that sense, you know. There are really 3 ways you can do it. You can, as I said, you can go individually to each of these societies and do it yourself. You can appoint an agent to do that on your behalf, because they have the expertise and the knowledge how all of this works. You can also go to one collection society. So you could potentially say to Sound Exchange, I'll give you a mandate, I'll give you the rights to collect for me around the world, and they could do that for you. So those are kind of the 3 ways you could have this set up. One thing that I think is important also when we talk about rights holder and performer. So in a lot of countries, there needs to be a registration from the rights holder. So the label needs to come in with a registration of the recording first before you can claim any performer contributions. So that's really important, because if you are then the rights holder, you own the master, then you would need to make that registration both on the master side and on the performer side. So you need to do both.
Rights holders, we should make sure all metadata is included. If you don't credit your performers, it will be harder for them to claim their performer income, and some societies will reject your registrations. And registrations can be invalid, and you won't get paid if the metadata is incorrect. There is no backdating on the rights holder side. Also, it is vital to have ISRCs. What this is basically saying is just reiterating what we've been talking about, credits. You know, if you don't have your credits right, they're not, you know, things aren't solid, people aren't going to get paid. That's just really the bottom line.
We talked about instruments. What about aliases, Bruce?
Well, you have to still put your government name. You know, it's like we need to put everything. We need to. Your name can be John Williams Sr. the Third. We need to make sure that we have it written
every which way, even with
every which way possible.
So like Kesha has a sign, Bruce Wayne, we know is the original Dark Knight, Sharia goes by Sharia or Sharia J or Sharia the Fierce, you know.
Yeah, come on.
The Fierce. that also goes with what you're talking about, aliases, right? Language matters, right? So we have to make sure all the information is there, but then how you're crediting yourself is very important too. If you just put beat maker, you're not going to be qualified to get paid, because the old way producers produced were they didn't actually touch any instruments, right? And you can be in producer without touching instruments. So if you just put producer or beat maker, it doesn't make sense to in the overall scheme of things. You have to list what you performed, and certain societies, they may look at producer as another role. They may credit it differently. So it's very important that you put everything down, like to reiterate what Ann said about don't put all instruments, put specifically what instruments that you've played. So putting beat producer and drum programmer, there's a huge and significant difference. And because drum programmer states you're performing. Beats producer, it just states it's just a title. It doesn't highlight that you're performing. And that's why language is very, very, very important when it comes to neighboring rights and public performance of the master, because it's to different societies, it means different things. So being consistent, clear, and providing as much information as possible could only help you. If you're registered with or a member of Sound Exchange, they ask you, hey, do you want us to collect for you around the world? And when you say yeah, you have to sign a mandate. It gives them the power of attorney, the right to go to these various societies to act on your behalf to collect. So all of it can come to you as well, come back to Sound Exchange. And it works differently for different societies. So for example, internationally, a lot of organizations use PPL. And then PPL will, again, they have partnerships and relationships and with other societies. So again, you would sign a mandate and they will collect for around the world for you. So it could all come one place. A mandate is just basically giving the organization that's doing your collections in your territory to do it for you around the world. So it could all be streamlined in one place.
It's a power of attorney for a period of time, whether it's perpetual or it's got a time frame on it, but it's like the right of the artist to be able to choose who they want representing them, correct?
Definitely. And I think the reason why a lot of creatives, they do the mandate because they look at it the same way as publishing. Oh yeah, I just sign in one place and let them do everything, and it's easier. It's just what they're used to.
I would love just a little recap. Sherry, if I asked you, tell me one thing you learned today, what would that be that you didn't know as a multi-talented person wearing multiple hats?
Well, actually, there's a few things. I definitely was excited about that new thing in Canada, how Canada has taken that on for for artists coming from outside of Canada, and we were able to get that same treatment. I think that's definitely a plus. Hopefully we can do more of that in other places that have that same type of energy. But that was a lot of information that just was unbeknownst to me, as an artist. No, I didn't have any idea that I could be getting paid, for the fact that I owned my master recording and I could be getting paid, a lot of different places internationally. I think that was one of the main reasons why I was so excited about connecting with you guys, because you had that information that I was not privy to. And I remember even after we got together and the more I got to know about it, I was out here hitting all my independent artists look, I just got some tea that could help us and really help enlighten us about the money that we're supposed to be, getting. So I think I'm just all for it and understanding, the things that we're entitled to that we don't have the understanding about. I think ultimately I just want to keep encouraging artists, like myself, who came in and didn't really have that understanding of what neighboring rights were and how it could be really beneficial to you as an artist, just in general. So I would say that, I want to keep encouraging independent artists and just any artists, creatives, to become a little bit more informed, because even to this day, like as long as I've been, linked up with you guys, I'm still learning new stuff now. And I think that that's very important for any creative artist, especially transitioning into an entrepreneur in this time.
Definitely.
Bruce?
I would say that, the public performance of the master or sound recording in the United States is going to become one of the fastest growing revenue streams. And I think that especially with creatives and allies who create Black music, it's like, I think it's important that we start looking at this revenue stream very seriously, because it's money that didn't exist before, especially now that streaming is bona fide the way things are done now. We need to add this process to how we administer our music going forward. So I'm constantly advocating and telling creatives, like, man, please do the research. Any questions you have, please reach out to us. You could look on the website, find us on Instagram, whatever. Like, please, like, we're here. We want to share this information. We need you to spread it, because it makes our job, I don't want to say easier, but it makes it, the more knowledgeable our clients are, or just creatives on a whole know about this, the more we can advocate to make more happen. Because especially when it comes to Black music, music is made differently. Culturally, music is created differently. So because it's created differently, sometimes I don't think we get that respect, and we don't want to wait 10 years before they get it. Let's get it. Let's try to do it right now. And I know I might sound a little long-winded, but this is a good opportunity to point out a few things, right? Sherry, like, if you make country music, there's a certain way you do it. You wake up at 9 o'clock, you go to the studio, you do your session reports, you're part of the union. It's just how it's done. When it comes to making hip hop and R&B, we might just wake up, music is right next in my bedroom, and I make it, and I'm uploading it to SoundCloud, or I'm putting it through my distribution, and I'm just like, how many streams did I get? I'm a victim of that. I've done that myself. So we need to start. Yes, raise your hand. Yes. like we get so excited what we're doing because we have so much access that we didn't have before of getting it out. There was always like this gatekeeper in the way. So now that gatekeeper is not in the way, that means, yes, we'll get more access and more people to listen to our music, but it also means that we have more responsibility now. And we are more in charge of our success. We can't blame anybody anymore.
No, that's what these forums are about. And a shout out to the reggaeton community and the Latin community, because that's a big emerging market, and one of my favorites, having grown up in Miami. So
right.
Exactly.
No, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. That it's your responsibility to kind of make sure that it's done. All the things that need to be done are done. This is, it's about the creative process, but it's also about getting paid for that creative process. And
exactly.
These are things you have contributed to this. You have actually already earned that income. You just need to know how to collect it. And, I think there is so much money still left on the table in the neighboring rights field. Yes, people are becoming more aware of it, but a big part of it is to make more people aware of it, because if you don't know that it exists or that you have a right to it, you don't know that you need to go and do something about it. So I think people would be surprised if they heard sort of how much money is actually left out there, and we just need to be better at going and going to get it.
Exactly.
Well, thank you, everyone. This was so much fun and hopefully so informative for the South by Southwest community. Yes. And, happy March.
Yeah.
Happy March.
Happy March. All right, cool. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank
Y'all
you.
too. Peace.